Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of Megaliths Mystery and whatever it was with myself and Neil McDonald over in Preston in England. The programs are getting very popular. We're getting great feedback, and we're absolutely delighted about that. Glad you're part of this conversation, and we'll never run out of topics to talk about. And this is a good way to, in a strange way, in the way the world we live in now, we're seeing a lot of the turbulence in the heavens being reflected upon this in the earth. Now, astrologer friends of mine who are really good, if you haven't checked out Fiona Edgar, she's an astrologer friend of mine in Northern Ireland. She was permanently banned by Facebook the other day. The reason for that being is that it was probably because she's so good at doing her astrology that it was probably other astrologers who were just jealous and nasty about it and probably supported anything she said. But she's still knocking around and doing her thing, and you probably see that I've done a few shows with her. But myself and Neil here today, we were just talking before we came on air how boring things are. Well, they got very boring today, but they were quite toxic until yesterday, Neil. I was watching the impeachment hearings of President Trump in the US, and they were absolutely psychotic. These politicians are mentally ill. They're not, or else the Chinese or somebody has blackmailed, has compromising videos of them. They were literally in a state of terror. I've never seen anything like it. And either he has stuff on them, the Chinese have stuff on them and told them to play ball, or they're literally terrified of the old political system, the heritage political system falling apart. And it was just sordid to watch. It was absolutely sordid. It was like, these are adults and they're some of the things they leveled against him. If you were to say that, you wouldn't say that's your worst enemy. And here they are feeling like they have a right to say it because he's been banned by Twitter and so on. And so there's a big banning thing going on at the moment. Like Dave Cullen lost his YouTube channel and then got it back. But good for him, he's moved to alt tech. He's not bothering anymore. And so here in Ireland, it's got even more totalitarian. We're getting done now €100 fines for going over 5 kilometers. And they basically has gone to a next level. They want people wearing masks outdoors because the weather wasn't too bad this weekend and people went to the countryside, and they're pissed off that people are enjoying the countryside. So now they're hinting that they want masks outdoors. So how is things over in Lancashire for you, Neil?
Over here, well, hello everybody. By the way, it's Groundhog Day in Preston. It's like you wake up every morning, and what shall we call today? Oh, we'll call it number 86, and tomorrow will be number 87. So it's just, but so I mean, I'm getting out for walks and that sort of thing. A lot of people out and about still. It doesn't seem to be making that much difference. The whole impeachment, trying to impeach somebody when he's coming out of office, there's something going on, isn't there? I know they want to make sure he doesn't get in again, but there's only got like 5 or 6 days left, haven't they? What do they hope to gain apart from that? There is something weird behind the scenes, isn't there? I always look back at that president of Belarus who got offered those multi-millions to shut his country down and said no. So that was the World Bank, it's obviously some people said yes, didn't they? And there's an agenda still unfolding, but who knows what the next thing is? The mask thing, yeah. I mean, it's so wrong, is it? Because those things make you ill. Imagine walking around in the outside with a paper mask on when it's raining.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to breathe it all in, like when it all gets mushy.
And it's a petri dish. It's a petri dish that it holds the bacteria.
Of course it does. There are children already. There's going to be an epidemic of micro viral illnesses because you can't, especially for kids, breathing in all that stuff God gave us little holes to get rid of it all, didn't he? But all of a sudden we know better. We've got to cover them up. It's just ridiculous. I think about this new, more virulent strain and everything. And I think if they let us go out there in the first place and do what we've done for hundreds of thousands of years and build up resistance, then maybe we'd never have got this extra virulent strain because it would have disappeared in in the summer. But,
Yep, and there you go. Is the World Health Organization even changed the meaning of the term herd immunity?
they did.
Herd immunity
Yeah,
is now created by vaccines, not
yeah,
by
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
not connection involvement with the herd.
yeah.
Anyway,
So it's never
so
happened before. They've never had vaccines before, but it's always worked. So I don't know. You
so
better not thinking about it. Go on.
yeah, we've done enough, but we have to kind of mention it from
Yeah.
the insanity of the material world as it presently stands. It feels like a relief to go into the world of the occult and esoteric, because
Oh
there
yes.
it makes a hell of a lot more sense in that going
It's
into
like
that
going home, isn't it? Yeah.
and continuing our third card, which is number 2 on the tarot, major arcana, is the High Priestess. Today we're going to talk about the High Priestess. Now, the High Priestess is a very interesting card because it's the first time the feminine enters into the process. The Fool began his journey, then he becomes the magician, and he becomes aware of this different poles of cognition, subconscious, conscious, and they can be channeled from one into the other. And what is imagined in the imagination world is then resolved in the material world. So now we become to the High Priestess card number 2. Now the High Priestess is a card of mystery. What happens now is that this is the pagan otherworld or heathen otherworld tarot. What happens now is with the card with the High Priestess is that different forces of experience come in, feminine forces, inclinations, greater emotional depth, dreams, multitasking, even working both poles of cognition together. Now, the High Priestess is a card of mystery and secrets yet to be revealed. In the Rider-Waite deck, she's holding an unopened apocalypse that says thought on it, which like the Egyptian god of knowledge. Now, she's also represents the kind of different elements of womanhood. She can be, in some cases, like in the Italian deck, she's shown as the papess. Now, there was a rumor that it was very strong in the Middle Ages that there was a secret female pope that had been born in Mainz, Germany. And this is how she replaced the High Priestess. She became the papess, or the female pope. Now, the papess is basically the same thing as the High Priestess. She's rooted in an ancient pagan archetype, probably in terms of the tarot, the goddess Isis with her lunar qualities. This shows fertility. This shows the aspect of the subconscious mind again, manifesting to lunar or feminine archetypal energies. The High Priestess is also the elements of female, which is both desirable but not always attainable. So the Fool is learning the complexities of the female, what the female archetype is and what the female energy is. That on the surface, what it might just be a motherly type figure or something, there's deeper and richer gifts to be found within the feminine subconscious mind. And that's a quick introduction to the High Priestess, or the papess, as it's known in Christian decks or Christian orientated decks. Over to you, Neil.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Do you know what I think is really fascinating? I mean, I agree with all that's fantastic, great, and the female side, which you said this first time we see the female, but in my tradition, the female is subconsciousness. Okay, so it's the female aspect, and that represents subconsciousness. You know, I think it's fantastic. It's that we're coming from two totally different directions, like the statue and what was that statue with the two heads that you took me to in it? Like the Jonas.
Bow Island, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like two different directions with one symbolism in the middle. So I don't think anybody's ever done this before. It's great to see the two traditions meld into one, you know. So we've got like, yours is like a divination, sort of looking into the future type of idea, wouldn't you say? Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah,
That feminine intuition. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that,
Oh, the whole tarot thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feminine
Big
intuition,
time.
though, yeah, get it. And also, where mine, the Western Mysteries, is more formulating the future. Like the future can be adapted. So from using the cards to adapt it rather than to see, but it's great to meld the two together, and because it makes more of a coherent sense, doesn't it? I'm quite excited that really. But anyway, I'll go through. I've got two high priestesses today. I've got the Rider-Waite, which is there, and I've got the Western Mysteries one, which you can't get coloured in. So this is printed coloured, which is more or less. There's not a lot of difference really. It's the same. It's pretty much the same thing. Okay. Now I can go. I'll go through the majority of. Basically, the High Priestess represents subconsciousness. Like you say, it's the female aspect, which is subconsciousness. I'll go through more on my own playlist on my YouTube channel, but this is like an overall idea of it. So we had the Fool, like you said, and he was super consciousness. The idea is that you've got like one whole idea of creation, one deity, one substance, like the Pramateria, which everything's made out of, and the Fool represents that, basically that one sort of substance, that one. What you do then, you have the deity, you call out the deity, you split it into three. So you've got the Fool, which would be super consciousness. Then you had our magician, which we said was self-consciousness, and then we've got our high priestess, which is subconsciousness. So to see them all there, you've got super consciousness here. It goes through the self-consciousness into we said this garden down here is super conscious, so he's drawing down the energy and putting his ideas, his meditation, his ideas that he wants to form in the future. He's filtering it through his self-conscious into subconsciousness. And you said if you rustled around in that garden, you'd find the High Priestess. Okay. So the High Priestess is there's that thing again where one card is the opposite to the one before. So the magician was very, very active, where you'll see that the High Priestess is she sat there passive and relaxed. But then you've got the number of the magician was 1, and we said that was a spot, and now we've got 2 with the High Priestess. We've got a line, so we're starting to build something. That's something. It was called the Naples Naples arrangement or something in occultism, and that's what we're starting to do. Because as we get the High Priest, we get to the next one, the Empress is 3, then you've got a triangle, and then you get another point which is 4. You've got a shape. So that's how things are built in that sort of way. So subconsciousness, then we know what superconsciousness is, and we know what self-consciousness is, but we're concentrating now on subconsciousness. This is what Jung called. I've printed a little bit of a talk by Jung, who he did this at the St. Bart's Hospital in London in 1936, and he said about subconsciousness. He said, or what he called collective unconscious, which is the same thing. He said, my thesis then is as follows: in addition to our immediate consciousness, which is of a thoroughly personal nature, and which we believe to be the only empirical, there exists a second psychic system of a collective, universal, and impersonal nature, which is identical in all individuals. This collective unconscious does not develop individually, but is inherited. It consists of pre-existing forms or archetypes, which can only become conscious secondarily, and which gives definite form to certain psychic conditions. So it's great to know that, that it's being recognized. I mean, Jung was fantastic in, obviously he had training as well, but he was great that he actually knew about subconsciousness, and he spoke accordingly. So what is subconsciousness? Well, it's as far as the as far as the card, blue represents subconsciousness, and obviously, well, it's all looking very blue. The moon, yeah, the moon is subconsciousness, and you can see the 3 stages of the moon in Our Lady's crown there, and she's got the silver water flowing, because water is subconsciousness, and the equal. I'll come back to that in a minute. And what you've got is a robe here, which is again blue for water, for subconscious, and it's running off. It's running out. So as you put an idea in, it's running out into the mass of the collective subconscious. And the idea is that the little scroll here is where all the answers or all subconsciousness is rolled up and kept. The idea is that she has the universal memory all wrapped up in one place. She's obviously the female goddesses as well: Artemis, Diana, Hecate, blah 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 blah, and all the different moon goddesses from throughout the world. So she's subconscious, but she's also showing what we were talking about last time, which was duality, because you've got the 2 pillars of Solomon's temple, Yakim and Boaz, saying that you've got this is the female pillar, which is severity, the male pillar of, can't remember what it is. No, you've gone back. And she's obviously the middle pillar of equilibrium. That's why she's relaxed and pretty passive. And you can see in the background, you've got pomegranates and palms all on this connecting trestle between the veil that goes down the back. So she's collecting. This is saying we're connecting the 2 sides of duality up. And pomegranates and palms, one is male, one is female. So obviously pomegranates will be the female one because it's got all the seeds. So that is pretty much, Gamel is the Hebrew letter, and that is camel. And camel gives the idea of moving. So camel is the ship of the devil, so it takes water from one area to another. So it's like the magician again. It's transferring ideas from subconsciousness back into consciousness. But so I thought what the idea is, let's look into what subconsciousness is. So my idea of the deity, when I said it was split into 3, you can see this in all the different traditions throughout the world. So you've got the Holy Trinity, obviously, in Christianity, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Hermes Trismegistus, which is in the Western mysteries and the occult teachings. That's obviously the thrice great. You've got the Egyptian Osiris, Horus, and Isis. In Samaria, there was an ancient text in Samaria which says the universe was divided into 3 regions, each of which became the domain of a god. So you split it into 3. Anu shared the sky, which is obviously what we call superconsciousness. The earth was given to Enil, which is self-consciousness, and E became the ruler of the waters, which you said is subconsciousness. So together they created a triad of the gods. Babylonia, you had the god which was split into 3, and they showed a triangle to represent it. Hindu, you've got Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And in Greece, the 4th century, Aristotle said all things are 3, and thrice is all, and let us use this number in the worship of the gods. So you see what I mean? Like you talk, every different tradition, if you look from into the esoteric side of it, is splitting it into this 3. So I'll finish off just with an idea of what subconsciousness is, because many years ago, when I started training in the Western Mission, Christ, over 40 years ago now, the years are rolling on. But I also did hypnotherapy training because I was interested in the subconscious. It was a fascinating subject to me. Because I didn't really want to be a therapist. I just wanted to see, because you watch stage hypnosis and you say, oh, how on earth does somebody do this? And of course, the whole idea is that the only aspect you can't, self-consciousness can't talk to superconsciousness. That's the idea. So you have to kill off self-conscious personality and talk directly to subconsciousness. because your self-conscious is going to stop you acting in a silly form, like dancing around on a stage, blah, blah, blah. And it's going to stop you if you want to use therapy. It's going to intervene. So you have to talk straight to the subconscious, and that way, obviously, things will react. Now, there's two ways to do it. You can either, like in therapy, you would do relaxation therapy, or you'll do meditation. And the idea there is that slows the self-conscious down to put it to sleep. So, but subconscious is always alive, waiting for suggestion. That's one way to do it. And the other way is through shock tactics, and to break you down, like when you join the army and you horrible little man, you're just a little rat, you're nothing. Break you down, kill you off, and build you up as something else. Now, ways of doing that would be constant repetition. If you constantly see some bang, 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 where repetition is something which scares you, and which you feel threatened by, that can break you down. Or you can have continuous verbal messages, like you get, like say, from if they decided they wanted an agenda, they could put it on the news and they would bang it out, bang it out, bang it out. And if you added that to like verbal to visual signs, and so you would look at these visual scary signs I mean, this would never happen, of course. Why would a government ever do this to their people? But if they did that through those methods, which is a total method of hypnosis, you would end up by creating cognitive dissonance, where your mind can't work out which is right and which is wrong, and that creates stress. It causes psychological stress, and that shuts you down. And your mind is then trying to find a way to relieve the stress. And the way it does it is by taking on an idea which is given to you, even though it might be a totally ridiculous idea. You take that idea on board, and that kills the stress off, and you start feeling more relaxed. Then, okay, then you've just been inputted with something which is totally foreign to you, a foreign idea, and then what you will find yourself doing is you don't want to go back into stress again. So if anybody then says, just a minute, the way you're behaving is just ridiculous, you'll then defend that position because you're frightened of going back into fear and stress. Now, like I said, that would never happen, would it? But that's I'll finish on that.
I'm picking up on some of the things. Yeah, it's very good. Especially the part you said about how it's broken down. You know, the army has their one way of doing it. You can see that happens to people in prison who've been in prison. They are basically stripped down to nothing, and it's particularly unfortunate. This is why, like, young guys being sent to prison for relatively minor things can actually destroy them in life. That's why I think we had law reform eventually, because they realized that sending young guys to prison for no reason or for little reason was only destroying them. But there's the thing is with and that definitely came out of the understanding the psychological aspects of that. What you're saying about the triple goddess thing, the tree thing, that also in Ireland had three names: Bamba, Folda, and Eru. And Eru was the land of Ireland, and Bamba what represented the kind of the learning, and Folda the cult, the spiritual. So you had the three things again. Now there was if you'll notice, and you also have the Norns in the Norse heritage, the weavers of fate. You have even that shown in Macbeth as the three witches. Now you always have one in this triple thing that's away from the rest. Like Vishnu was away from the other two in the Vedic and Hindu philosophy, and the Celtic in the Irish one, Eru is away from Folda and Bamba. Now there was a theory of painting written by, I think, Ruskin back in the early 1800s, and he discovered that this also shows up in visual forms as well. He showed a landscape painting where if you had one cow in the field, it looked okay. If you had two cows in the field standing next to each other or apart, people didn't like the painting as much. If you had three cows in the field, they didn't like the painting if the three cows were together in one corner, or three horses. But if you had two on this side and one over here, people were automatically drawn to the painting. So it was a triple thing, but there's always one that's an outsider. And that could
shows how
represent
deep the archetypes go, doesn't it?
big time. It goes into art and everything. And, you know, it shows that there has to be one that's a slight difference, because that creates the perspective, the separation between the whole and the one, where this could be the material world and that could be the spiritual world. And that and I think he even proved that in court. He actually proved that in court,
Really?
that there was two on this side and one on this side draws people in and makes them want to, because the archetype, it speaks deep to their subconscious mind. Now, this you also mentioned, I think it was Aldous Huxley who came up with the concept, the term superconsciousness. And Jung had his own, and Colin Wilson did some, I think a book called Superconsciousness. So he did a lot into it as well. The whole thing is that, again, like you see, when we get to the high priestess, we're in the first card of the tarot that deals with spiritual matters, esoteric mystery. You know, the magician is quite a practical card. You know, he's a bootmaker, he's a shoemaker. And now we're in the world of magic and mysteries. And, you know, as you said, she was associated with the lunar goddesses. One particularly in the Rider-Waite deck, is Hathor, big time. She's definitely connected to Hathor. And the star Sirius, Sirius as well, very heavily. So that comes deeply out of Egyptian. There you can see the Hathor, the Egyptian headdress. And this also ties into the cow. And the cow goddess is another enormous maxim within every single mythology. Now, Jung, when he was talking about the subconscious mind and archetypes and man and I think it was Man and the Symbols, that book, he did actually mention the triple thing, including the subject of the goddesses, the three goddesses, the three names Ireland had of three goddesses. And also you got the Morrigan, the Morrigana, the Bave, and the Morrigan, the Bave, and the Morrigana. You have the three in the Raven goddess, and they represent death, afterbirth, and renewal, and lessons from death, this kind of thing. And so the triple thing is, yes, you have duality, 1 and 2, you know, that's a fact in the universe, dualism. But the 3 is what puts it into motion. It puts that into motion when you add the third element. It's almost like the engine that makes the other 2 move. And that's a very powerful idea.
You know, in Ireland and in some places in Northern England, you've got the 3. What's the tree? What's it called?
The Triscala.
The Triscala, yeah. That's
yeah, and you get that everywhere. That's all over. And the next one, that's swastika. It's interesting. They revolve into bouncing. They're machines of the subconscious mind. They're gears of the psyche. These symbols represent.
Yeah, I heard a
new gear engages, another gear engages, and you become more and more developed. And the whole thing of how you work with the subconscious, and there's some of the archetypes and stuff like that. Jung and the likes of Joseph Campbell very much promote, and it is correct, of the concept of the monomyth, that you are, and even the Irish writer James Joyce, that you are what all the trials and tribulations that you go through in your daily life are all directly connected to the trials and tribulations experienced by the gods or the heroes of mythology. And when you can rationalize that, well, not rationalize it, but incorporate that. So you say, like, the day you're having a difficult day, and you say, well, you know, in Christians will say, oh, you're undergoing the suffering of Christ. In mythology, you might say, well, this is like Orpheus, my dark night of the soul. This is like Orpheus' descent into the underworld. I've got to solve this problem. This is like going into the labyrinth to slay the Minotaur. You know, this kind of thing. And when you do that, when you start to see your life in these monomythic terms and deliberately and purposefully apply the archetypes of mythology inside events in your own life, I can tell you for a fact they are much, much easier to deal with. because you're almost calming your subconscious mind. And as a result, your subconscious mind is calming yours. So for instance, at the moment, we're all locked up and we're locked down. You fellas like you and I can't do anything, right? Well, we're in exile. That's what that's the monomyth I'm putting this is. We're in exile. We're very much out of the world at the moment. And this is probably what inspired us to make this series of videos and why people are watching them and enjoying them, is because the journey is now inward. It's internal, right? It's internal because we're like we're Jonah in the belly of the whale. We're alone now. We're in the and there's all through history there's this kind of thing of the famous king who's on the run and has a discussion with a spider or has a discussion with a stranger, this kind of thing. And even within the Christian thing, where Jesus is in the desert, he's tempted by Satan. Now, many people believe that was Jesus having doubts and, having doubts about his purpose in life while in his 40 days. But it's the same kind of thing. It's a subconscious mind saying why you're doing it. And he has to say, well, I have to do it. It's part of my destiny. It's my monomyth. And so this is not only was the likes of Jung and Joseph Campbell were they fantastic people and even James Joyce in his book Ulysses, were they amazing at identifying the monomyth in terms of our everyday epic, but also they gave us the solutions to help to how that stuff helps us. And that is you evoke the trials and tribulations, good and bad, of the gods within your own life. And this is why I am a pagan, because I found that stuff very, very useful and helpful to me in a way that any other spiritual tradition didn't, was this incorporation of the archetypes in my daily life. It was a fantastic liberating thing. Instead of the vast world of mythology. I often refer to the Bhagavad Gita and the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna's doubts are very similar to how they're portrayed in the New Testament of Jesus in the desert. They're like, what is the purpose? What is the meaning for this? And then, Krishna just says, there is no meaning except to experience the material world. And that's why he uses the term fight, Arjuna, fight. Just like, you must do it. Get out there and do it. Because the only way you can actually make miracles happen is to bring the subconscious into manifest. And the easiest way and most powerful way of doing that is by exploring your monomyth and applying the tribulations of the gods into your own life. And it does. I can tell anyone watching this video, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to live.
Yeah, it's great to be able to use the archetypes to bring some context to what you're doing, some meaning to it, doesn't it? It makes sense of why you're going through any particular experience at any time, and it makes it a lot easier. It can get you through, can't it?
Big time. And because it also takes away a lot of these things, like when you get depressed about something like that, a lot of that selfishness and an inability to see a solution out of that. And that's because you're kind of giving up on yourself. But when you can draw from this deep well of mythological archetypes, you will find that it knocks you out of that defeatist thinking and put you in a situation, well, if it works, if it's good enough for the gods, it's good enough for me.
Yeah, and you can see everything that's a circle anyway. It's like we're on our fool's journey. Well, the fool always get. I mean, I'm up just doing the hermit now when he gets to. So every circle, the ring past naught, everything you're doing has an end. You've got to remember that, haven't you? It will, whatever it is, does everything always goes in a circular motion.
Yeah.
So no matter how bad it is, you could look at your archetypes. You can put yourself in a position on that journey, which is what the tarot is in many ways, I suppose. And then. And you can see that there will be an end to this. We'll find our way out of it,
And the high priestess represents that. She kind of her lunar connections, and also the pomegranates and the palms behind her. This is constant renewal of nature. This is constant. The moon is a secular thing. She's also female. She menstruates. She will go through a menstrual cycle and begin a new one. This is
Yes.
very powerful concepts of the very pagan, the repetitive thing that comes back and back and back. It never ends. Well, let's do some megaliths. I wanted to talk anyway about Malta because we both have a lot of experience there, and you know, that's, you know, as we're kind of megalithic advocates.
Yeah,
think,
we've been neglecting the megaliths a bit, haven't we? We've been doing the mysteries and not many megaliths. Yeah,
we're eclectic. We're eclectic.
We're an eclectic lot. Deep down, we're an eclectic lot.
But yeah, Malta. Malta is a fascinating place. It's a very small island. It's tiny. It's quite heavily, densely populated. Excuse me, I'm still getting over this thing. Densely populated, and for its size. And it's interesting that one half of the island is very heavily populated. The other half is practically desert. But I found it interesting, like split down the middle. But it's covered in megaliths that are quite different than anywhere else. And what always struck me about the megaliths of Malta, and they're ancient, is their architectural gravitas. They're not just rough stones piled on top of one another. There is a real sense of design and a real sense of almost classiness connected to them. That you're really looking at ancient temples of a very high, sophisticated culture. You're talking a serious level of artistic and other visual elements, the sense of design and architecture. It's the only place in Europe. You'd have to go to Egypt from the next after that. And it wasn't until the classical era in Europe that anything comparable showed up again of that level of sophistication. When I was in the hypogeum of Hal Saffanini and saw this architecture inside there, and I could not believe it was 5,500 years old. It looked straight out of classical Greece or Rome. Even the aesthetic, the design functionality of it was very similar to that design. Now, of course, they portray these people, the official guys portray these people as like grunting troglodytes, and it's pretty awful because one of the reasons for this is the Jesuits completely control antiquities in Malta. And if you go to any Maltese museum or any megalithic location where they have a heritage center, there's always, they look like the Flintstones, like this. They show the ancient builders in their rags, and yet they make these sophisticated. We're back, like I said, in like ancient people. They always portrayed them in rags, even though they had sophisticated gold and everything else. It's just a stereotype that's been put in there through things like the Jesuits who control these antiquities. But Malta, I went there like last year, I think it was. Was it? Yeah, it was last year. And it was the first time I've been there. I was there 3 years previous. And the place felt there's a different energy in the place. The megaliths felt different. There was something different I felt there, and I can't fully explain it, but there was an energetic change in them. Now, I don't know why that was, but this has happened to me in a few places where I've sensed these change. But for me, the main interest in Malta is the statues of the people. Well, they're always women, what they call them, the goddesses and stuff. Mm-hmm. There's the sleeping lady that was found in the Hal Saffanini, beautiful statue. She's tiny. That's I think that's might be even that's about scale. That's about the scale size of it. Yeah, now look at her body type. She doesn't look like she's sleeping. She looks like she's not well. Now we hear legends that the first people that came to Malta were from Sicily 5,000 years ago, and they said that the giants already lived there. I look at her, I see a giant. There's also the other famous one at Tarjim, where it's just the lower part of a body of a woman, and she still has the same massive things. Now, again, right next to that in the museum, like the Museum of Antiquities in Valletta, the capital, they will have that statue of her and other statues from the period, where she has braided hair, pleated skirt, So there's obviously a high level of fashion. We'll use that word. And then next to her is a picture of a woman wearing an animal skin, like Betty Flintstone. So that's Malta. That's what. Tell us about your feelings about the megaliths in Malta.
Malta, okay. I suppose it's the same as you. It's like the weird thing about it is that they kind of appeared pretty much out of nowhere, and well, there was set all the dates are all set by pottery. It came over mainly came over from Sicily, but the only early sites you see are pre above, because they have above the ground and they have below the ground, which seems to be the same. Okay, so they think that the early burials that were in lobes, they think they were the first thing. But apart from that, that's just a theory that's about. Apart from that, it's as if some people arrived and built these crazy, amazing, sophisticated buildings like this, and they had no out of nowhere. Because you just don't get a load of sort of Fred Flintstones thinking, I know, I'll build a temple today. You know, so it's as if they arrived from nowhere. The official dating is about 4,000 BC, so 6,000 years ago. And then they stayed for 1,000 years and then gone like that. But these are the only things like it in Europe, and they're actually because Malta is a rock, a great big huge rock. They're actually stood on the rock. They don't even go into the ground like our megaliths do. So they were built first like an ace of spades, like 1, 2, and then they had a lobe at the top. Then they had 2, 4 lobes, and then lobe. But they built them and bigger. Gigantia shows it better like that. So you've got like these huge, and they all start on that design. But the amazing thing is to me that where these people came from, who were they, and where did they go, and what were they doing in the meantime? I do have one interesting theory, which is my own little theory, which I like very much, is that they acted once they were there as a kind of a religious community that blessed people who traveled through the Med, because the Mediterranean, even going back to the Phoenicians, which was well before the Phoenicians, but we know that it would be a trading route, because from the east to the west, from the Levant right the way through Greece, North Africa on one side, Europe on the bottom, out to the Atlantic. So I see them as like a place where you would go and you would stop and you would take your blessing mid-journey, maybe do a bit of trading, and then carry on. There's a place in, this is Tajin, Al-Jahim, and on the side of it, somewhere there's a little hole where you can see there's a little what's the place? An altar outside. There's a hole through what I call the oracle hole, and you can see the oracle bit sitting inside. So, who were they? And I think that's the theory I like. But it's just amazing that these are all over the island, usually in pairs. The temples are usually in pairs, and probably some sort of religious community blessing the. But where did they come from? That's the thing. How do they suddenly appear? Because you're looking at the pyramid. The pyramids are like 2,500 BC. These are thousands of years before that, and they're the only place on the planet that you see them.
Yep, and it shows a high level of sophistication.
Yeah, from nowhere.
But even if you said it was like a pilgrimage stop on a route or on a trade route or something, even that shows a high level of cultural sophistication too. Mm-hmm. That those trade routes even existed at that period. That there was something like that was required. It just goes to show you how much is hidden. Of course, in Malta, there's also the mystery of the cart routes. Have you seen these things?
Oh God, yeah. I just before you say that, we've talked about the trade route that the megalithic builders started in the Levant, came all the way through past Malta. So, you know, they could have been a stop-off place for the actual Neolithic. Well, they would have been, wouldn't they? Because they were already a Neolithic society, and we know that there was a trade route from the Med. But yeah, the cart routes, cart routes are absolutely amazing, aren't they? There's so many different theories. It's like a theory. It's like a little subject all of its own, isn't it? And when you see them, there's one place high up on a hill they call Clapham Junction, and they're just going off in different directions and everything. And you, no matter when you think of a theory, there's something disproves it.
Yeah.
And then they come to stop. Sorry,
they're definitely not cart routes for wheels, because some of them go like this. They go from parallel to this and then over again like that. What kind of wheel on an axle does that, you know? And
that's true.
and then there's other ones where they'll have two lines will intersect, and you think, oh, I'll cut through the other. It stops and then it begins on the other side. So what? The cart wheel went over that. And then like a places like St. George's Bay, I've got a great video of the one going into the sea. There's a few of them, and the other ones even go off cliffs. And the Clapham Junction one is mental. It's like this kind of thing. They're definitely not for. I've also seen them in Sardinia as well, and they're in Malta, Portugal too. They're definitely not wheeled for wheeled vehicles. Absolutely, because there's no wheeled vehicle that can behave like that. But
one of them.
There's also no mark in the middle of a horse. You'd have horses would have worn down the
middle.
The middle is raised like that. It's like
there's a place I just trying to remember the name of the. There's a one of the temples that people very rarely go to because it's locked off. You have to make an appointment with Heritage Malta. I just can't see the name of it. I can't remember the name of it, but we went there and you can see that this is the only place you can see that a track rope comes up to it and goes round it.
Yeah.
Now, so that means that these track ropes were after the temples were built. That's it. There's only one more place where you can put some dating in it. Is where it goes over the top of a Phoenician burial. It goes right over the top, so they cut through it. So it was before. So it was done before the Dark Ages, 500 to 700, well, to the Iron Age. So about 500 years there, from 500 AD to 1000, and after, 4,000 BC. But that's not. Well, it narrows it down a bit. But still a wide, still 3,500 years or something, isn't it? But it's such a. You look at them and you think, well, what's going on? What are these things? And they stop right on the top of a cliff where there's a cave underneath, as if something has been taken out of the cave and lifted, or the other way around.
In Gozo, near the inland sea, at the top of it's like a kind of desert on top of a plateau, there's some mad looking ones. And when I was looking at them, I was kind of struck by their relationship to the sky. And I had my own theory at the time. I don't know if it's true that they were connected to star paths, or because remember we went to Braemore in Ireland, and they had like along the circles, they had lines of stones. And it was a very interesting theory that they represented the path of comets in the sky. And it's, and it's amazing today that even Braemore today is a dark sky observatory. So it's like it still continues the ancient heritage. But in Malta, I wondered the same thing too. If it was if these things represented the movements of stars in the heavens, and you filled them with water, and the starlight was reflected in the water, the moonlight was reflected in the water. I was just because I could not think of anything practical, because they make no sense.
Have you seen the ones at Clapham Junction where there's thousands all together? And you just and you can understand why it's called Clapham Junction, and some of them are in parallel, and some of them are all over the place. But it just, you think, okay, if it's well, why so many of them, and why why so deep, and the questions pour out, don't they? But very few answers.
But it's that's what makes them. And There is no, I mean, if you go to if you go to the Museum of Valletta, they have a very nice display. It's like it's a model, but a full-size model of
right on the top third floor, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a video plays all the time of some English chap who's an archaeologist or something, and he is absolutely bewildered too. And he watched the video, he's going, "What are these things? You know, what purpose do
he's
they
the
serve?"
expert.
Yeah,
I've been studying these 30 years now. What are they? No idea.
And he shows ones that go like this, right, and they go straight, and then it goes in like this, and then out like that. You know, like
a chicane.
Yeah, it's just you just couldn't. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they all have bikes.
Yeah, or unicycles maybe. I don't.
Yeah, something like that.
But even when you look at that, sometimes the trenches. But have you looked inside the trenches? They go. If you put your hand in them, they're kind of concaved in at the sides. So then they're like almost like that. You know, they're not like a straight flat. A lot of them are like that. You can put your hands inside and run along the inside.
It's water. It's run down.
That's what I was thinking. But then they flow uphill. I mean, it's like every time you think, oh, we're onto a thing here. And then there's parts where there's no water. You know, there's like it's in the desert. You know, basically.
Whenever you find there's always one that breaks the rule.
Yeah, it's almost like the people who built them in the Bronze Age or whatever were doing it to mess with our heads, because they do mess with your head. Well, it's you try because you go into that world of what's the word, uncanny valley, where your mind cannot comprehend it. So you say, "The hell with that! I'm going for a pint."
Let's make one that goes off at an angle. That'll confuse them.
But that's Malta. I would suggest people go there and definitely check the place out. It's a very beautiful country, very cheap to go there too, very inexpensive. And once you're in there too as well, and it's full of helpful people that are very proud of their country and only too glad to show you.
It's the good thing as well about it is that you can speak. There's no language barrier at all because English is their second language. And I'd say I've been going for, it must be 15 years, 16 years every year. And this is the first year I couldn't go, and I've really missed it. And it's because it's beautifully sunny as well. And there's such an atmosphere to the place, and that you just don't get anywhere else. It's a relaxed. So, I mean, in the like Valletta and Salima and that sort of area, it's all pretty crowded. So there's a lot of traffic and that sort of thing, but it's still a very relaxed, peaceful, sort of friendly, incredibly friendly place.
Yeah, even in like the busier streets, like Salima is very, very busy. You can still go for an ice cream along the waterfront there, and it's very friendly and lays back. It's not stressful. And the mixtures of different cultures. I mean, it's like this mixture of English, Italian, and Arabic. It's a very unique mix, and it's very it's very there's nowhere else I think like it. So it's definitely worth visiting. Now I think we're coming up to the end of the hour, and there's one final thing I mentioned at the beginning I would like to add to the show. I want to talk about any local folklore that you grew up with. I'll start with what you just told me before we start.
Can I just do that?
Yeah, there we go. There's his book. I have that. It's a very good book. Got some good photos in that too. But
the book about Malta. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, sorry. The local folklore. I'll talk about one that I didn't know about until I was a teenager. But like Ireland is saturated in it. Well, maybe not as much as it used to be, but it was even when I was growing up. And even every different neighborhood had its own like mythology or folklore. Now, there was a neighborhood I grew up in. When I started to become a teenager, I started to go to the dances and like discos and stuff in a neighborhood that was on the other side of the north side of Dublin, in a place. It was over by the coast on the sea, and so we used to go there, and I made friends with some people there. And after we would be finished going to the disco, we'd all go out to a place called Bull Island, which was a huge sandbar, and had a footbridge across. And it was an artificially created island, actually created by Captain Bligh from Mutiny and the Bounty, who was actually a brilliant marine engineer. And he designed the two walls of Dublin Bay that actually kept the river from silting up all the time. But this sand island became a byproduct of it. And anyway, walking out there, we were out there one night, and they told us about, did you ever hear about the trenchies? And I says, what's that? And they said, they're like creatures that you, like fairies, like they live in the sand in the bay, and they're like half human and half fish. And you will see them at certain times flapping about in the mud, but they look like people, but they act like mud skippers or some kind of like John Dory type. They're a mixture of fish and human, and they live that they will get you if you go into the usual like fairy leprechaun type thing. They'll get you if you go into their domain. And these kids were adamant that these things existed. They were not like, having a laugh. They were adamant, and their parents had spoken about these and stuff. Don't go near that bridge after late at night, which we walked across because the trenches are all down there. Now, what's funny about that? This is a very Lovecraftian thing as well. The whole idea of the mixture of the human and the sea animal, and it reminded me of the shadow over Innsmouth, which was one of Lovecraft's favorite story about a town where people were half fish, half person. And
how did they get around?
What's that?
How did they walk?
They eventually evolved into fish. They started out as humans, eventually evolved into fish, and went to live in
Revolved.
Well, there's a very deep subconscious thing to that. They went back into the subconscious world. In fact, at the end of the shadow of Innsmouth, the protagonist in the story ends up living in a world of dreams below the oceans.
Wow.
So there you
go. That's subconscious. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. So I often wondered if that was some kind of thing later on, if that was rooted in the local neighborhood, that was something happened there, like a ship sunk or kids went out on a low tide, and the tide came in and drowned them, and then these things developed from that as a way of saying don't go there. But I always found that a very interesting one, because it was such a localized mythology in one neighborhood in Dublin, but yet these kids were adamant that these trenches existed. So that was like one that always stuck with me about a local folk. Okay, what do you know from where you grew up?
Well, here, I'm thinking we had a couple of things. One, you always have we had the doctor's house. This is like the local superstition where you see all the like the horror films where it's all dark, and as your kids, it's a doctor's house. Nobody lives there now because the doctor killed people and all that. So of course, at one point in time, we had to go around and break in at the back because we were a bit naughty when we were allowed. And it was well scary in there, but that's just a local thing. But we mainly Lancashire, Cumbria, and over to the Isle of Man, that area, we have the boggarts, and the boggarts are tall, hairy creatures with glowing eyes. They have got sharp teeth, sharp claws, and they're magical, and they do all sorts of mischief. There's a place quite near to here, where there's the story of the written stone. It's a massive stone. It really is quite huge. It must be about maybe 10 foot long, big thick stone, and it's got something written on it. It's the name of the people nearby, the name of the people at the farm. And the story is that when somebody opened a dairy nearby, he wanted to move the stone into the dairy. So it took them, I think it was something like 12 horses to pull it, and all these different guides. It took them ages so they put it into the dairy, to use it in the dairy as, I don't know, something to sit on or whatever. But as soon as he did, all of the cows stopped making milk, and there was all sorts of disasters, like the roof kept falling off. And the thing about roofs and with boggarts. So what they did eventually thought, listen, it's oil, and somebody, and the calves were aborted and all that sort of thing. So they decided to move it back, and they just got one horse to pull it along to take it back because it wanted to go back. The weight had totally changed. And so they have it sitting there now, and I take people to see it on some of my Lancashire Day tours. And so that's the story of the boggarts around here. And there's one on the Isle of Man, where there's a church, St. Trinian's Church, doesn't have a roof on it. And the story is here that they built the church, and then they put the boggart lived on the hill next to it. Can't remember the name of the hill, but he lives up on the forest on the hill. And when he saw the church, he was a bit disconcerted, because one thing Boggart's like is peace and quiet. And he knew that as soon as the roof went on the church, the bells would be fitted and they'd start ringing. So they fit, when the roof came on, the winds blew, it rustled up a magical storm, and the wind blew the roof off. So they put it back again, and the same thing happened again. And then, so there was a guy in the village who was a magician, he was a tailor, and he did magical stitching. So he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll sit, when you finish the roof, I'll sit in the church all night, and I'll do my magical stitching, and and that'll keep the boggart off. I'll keep him away. I'll send his magic back to him, and I'll keep him away. So he was sat there in the middle. He said he did as he was told. He was sat there in the middle of as he said, of the church, doing his magical stitching, and then he could hear the wind going up and up. So he stitched a bit stronger. He put his magic out stronger, and then a hole appeared in the floor, and the boggart came up the hole. He just threw down his stitching and ran like hell to another nearby church, a lovely old church that's been there since time immemorial. And he managed to get inside the church for strength, but the boggart tore his own head off and threw it at him, and it exploded. But they've never put the church back on St. Trinian's Church ever again to this day, so as not to upset the boggarts. But there's a story.
That's brilliant. That is very much like the leprechaun. The thing is too with the leprechaun is that I was living in America when those movies Leprechaun came out. You ever seen those horror movies Leprechaun? Yeah. And they're very funny actually. But the leprechaun's like a serial killer. And I remember those films first came out, the Irish Americans were complaining that this was negatively stereotyping leprechaun. And I was like, you haven't got a clue. That's exactly how people in Ireland used to see them. They were terrified of them. They were evil. And, you know, they all thought the leprechauns in America were like the Lucky Charms or the cereal box.
Little guy with a green hat.
Yeah. You know, this guy, he's all friendly and helpful. Yeah. It's like they had no idea the fairies were considered evil and terrifying. But what you said something interesting then about the silence, the need for silence. That's a theory even everywhere. That the fairies or whatever they are, the
elementals don't like to be disturbed.
They don't. They've all retreated now into things, places like coal mines, old abandoned factories and big buildings. And I did a very good talk last year, which is 6 months ago, with a lady called Kate in England. I'll put the link below. And we were talking about the possibility that many of these ghost hunters, when they go into these old abandoned places, don't realize they're probably encountering, when they do encounter paranormal things, these elemental type entities rather than ghost of a dead person, because a lot of them are mythologically or folklore bereft, and they don't understand. They're obsessed with the idea that these are the spirits of the spirits of the dead. They don't understand that they could actually be dealing with everything from like fairies to demons and jinns, especially, and in these places. Yeah. There's a very good channel about a guy who explores old mines in America, and it's not a paranormal channel. He just explores mines, old coal mines and old gold mines. Oh, there's millions of them in America, I guess. And he has captured some very spooky things, like voices speaking weird languages and stuff down the back of the tunnels and stuff. And it's not a paranormal channel, but it's just are things moving by themselves, like a chain that starts moving by itself, like that, you know. And so, you know, that's definitely true. We've lost our fairies and their elementals in the modern world because the modern world is noisy and it's electric, and they've retreated into the cave and coal mines.
The thing is that the elementals were always known as well to be very tricky and quite dangerous, you know. Because I know there was somebody who's kind of a new agey type religion, and they'd started this YouTube channel, and not YouTube, Facebook, and it was all about fairies. And they said, "Well, do you want to join?" I said, "Well, no, I don't want to join. No." And they were quite offended. I thought, well, I'm a bit scared of them, really. You know, they're not like little things you set on you. You know, they can do it. So,
I had an idea for a short story, and it's actually it's kind of a joke theory I have, that the fairies possessed Margaret Thatcher and made her close down all coal mines in England, Wales, and Scotland so they could have somewhere to live.
The fairy's not for turning.
Yeah. So the fairies deliberately stopped the coal mining industry in England, Scotland, and
Oh,
Wales.
wow, nice. So they could go and live
They could go live
inside. Oh, what a good idea. Oh,
yeah, so
fantastic.
that'd be a good idea for like a Doctor Who episode or something.
Oh,
But
brilliant.
anyway, that's been a brilliant hour again. And
Yeah.
this video is on my channel, but the next one, you know, is on we Daisy Chain, Leapfrog, is on Neil's channel. So you have to subscribe to both channels and hit the notification button on both channels.
Yeah, please
And-
subscribe to both. Yeah.
And then thumb them up and share them, because I don't think there's anything like this on the internet at the moment, and it's discussing the esoteric and stuff in this way. So we covered the priestess, the high priestess, and the pappas. We've covered Malta, the megaliths there, and we spoke about a little bit local folklore and especially consciousness, which is basically what when you think about it, there was one theme to these whole videos, it'd probably be consciousness.
It's kind
But
of all
anyway,
joined together, didn't it? As a whole. Yeah.
So, have you anything to promote, or no? We're not. We're all kind of basically.
Don't think of anything else. I've done my book.
Show your book again. Show your book. Yeah.
And subscribe to the channel, and that's wonderful. Yeah, enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
show your Maltese book again.
There we go.
There you go.
Malta and Gozo, a megalithic journey by
And
that guy.
you'll have a link below. You have a link for this.
Yeah, on my channel, I'll put a link to my books below. So if anyone wants to buy it, just click on it, and it'll take you straight to buying it.
Cool beans. So until number 7 on your channel, I will say goodbye and see you next time. And goodbye everyone else.
Goodbye, everybody. Cheers.